Good evening, everyone. As you know, we are getting close to Pesach, and we will be retelling, once again, the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And in many ways, the first and most impactful event that really led and developed Moshe into the character he was, shaped him into the person he would become, was when Moshe left Paro's house only to find a Mitzri hitting a Jew. We know the story, we know what happens. The Torah tells us, Vayifen cho v'cho vayar ki ein ish. Moshe looked in both directions. He saw there was no person. Now Rashi tells us, somewhat famously, that Moshe had an incredible ability that he was able to look ahead at the Dorot, the generations that would come from this Mitzri, and see with Ruach HaKodesh that there was no negative impact that would come from his killing of this Mitzri. And as such, he carried out the judgment that was appropriate, and he killed the Mitzri and he hid him in the sand. Now, what an incredible Rashi. And we've heard this statement from Chazal many times, but perhaps we fail to sometimes realize the impact that it has, because it demonstrates for us the theoretical ability to imagine what would be if we could see the real impact of our actions. Moshe saw that there was nothing that was going to come from this Mitzri, and therefore he acted. But Chazal teach us on the flip, or on the other side, Kol hamatzil nefesh ach miYisrael ki ilu matzil olam maleh. That anyone who saves a single person in this world, it's as if they are literally saving an entire world, because from that single individual will come children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and an endless amount of possibilities. Now, we, the Jewish people, know this all too well. How many of us have relatives, or perhaps even come from relatives, in which only one person survived from a family in the Shoah, and we look around at perhaps hundreds that have come from that one individual? An incredible accomplishment, and again, it reminds us of the power of saving one individual. Now, if saving one person is building an Olam Maleh, then Judy Feld Carr, our guest for this evening, has literally saved generations. You're going to hear more about her, and I know all of you have been privileged to watch the videos, the documentaries, but just think of the concept of saving over 3,500 Syrian Jews over a 25-year period between 1975 and 2000. Imagine how many current descendants, I don't have a clue the number, maybe she does, but imagine how many current descendants are counted among those who she saved, who would not be alive today, let alone living perhaps successful lives that they are. Her story is absolutely incredible. You've seen, as I mentioned, and read so much about it, and I'm truly excited, as are you, for this evening's program. But before I turn over the reins of tonight's program to Hadassa Pertman, who's going to run with it, I want to thank a few people. First and foremost, many of you don't know this, but the idea for tonight's program actually came from Julie Kashitsky, who I often talk to about different inspirational female role models, who I like to try, if possible, to bring to Ulpanat, usually in the context of a grade 12 course, depending on the year, but certainly as speakers. And she said, have you had Miss Judy Feld Carr recently? And I said, no, not in many years. She says, I'm going to make it happen. And of course, she arranged the program. Many of you know she's in need of refuah shlema in Israel, but Baruch Hashem, she's getting a little bit better each and every day. Special thank you to Miriam Besson and Sharon Fixler for working so hard in arranging all the details associated with tonight's program. And of course, incredible thank you to our Ulpanat graduate, current executive board member and former member of our faculty, Hadassa Pertman, for being our moderator for this evening. I just want to close by mentioning that throughout our lives, each of us at different points are presented with opportunities to lead others. Often we're shy, perhaps timid, maybe a bit unsure of ourselves, certainly filled with self-doubt. Can we really do this? Can we make this happen? Can we be successful? We look around, we ask ourselves all sorts of questions and have all sorts of doubts. Me? You sure? Should I? Rarely are we willing to take risks. And we often believe that it's impossible to accomplish what theoretically could be accomplished. And perhaps once upon a time, Mrs. Judy Feld Carr was no different, but she did perform the impossible in an inspirational way for all of us. Pesach is about going from Avdut to Cherut, and she helped so many leave real Avdut and find true Cherut. It's an honor to introduce Mrs. Judy Feld Carr, and again, thank you for joining us this evening. Hadassa, thank you. The floor is all yours.
Hi, everyone. It is such an honor to be here tonight. In our email exchanges, I told Mrs. Feld Carr that when I was a young girl, I very distinctly remember hearing her story, and it served as an inspiration for me for so many years. And I often reflect and think back to how it is that you did what you did. And being a mother of small children, I now am especially in awe of what it is that you did at the time in your life that you did it. This is really one of the greatest honors of my life to be interviewing you tonight. And I know that this week there's a big interview that everyone is talking about, but as far as I'm concerned, we can forget Oprah and Harry and Meghan. This is the interview of 2021. So I want to start out by talking about your life, which is very colorful from the very beginning. You grew up in Sudbury, Ontario. You describe in the documentary some of the survival skills that your father passed on to you, which are most unique for a young Jewish lady. And I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what it was like to grow up in a small Jewish community in a Northern Ontario town.
Well, let me try to, can you hear me? Okay. Let me try to explain to you. I was born in Montreal, but we moved to Sudbury when I was 5. My father was a fur trader with the, I guess you can't call them Indians anymore, with the Aboriginals. My father lived on the trap lines. He was a hunter, he was a fisherman. He trapped fur, and I used to go with him every few weekends because he told me I would learn more on the reservations than I would in school. Sudbury was very, very hard. It was, when I was in grade 2, the public school burnt down, so I had to go to a Catholic school. I was the only Jew. The day before Pesach, on a Thursday, I never forgot it, because I was going home from school and 3 kids in grade 6 hit me in the face with rocks because I killed Christ, and they knocked my front teeth out. Fortunately, I was in grade 2 and I still had baby teeth. Big teeth hadn't come in. And I spent the first Seder when my grandmother came from New York to Sudbury, and everybody from Sudbury used to come to our house. There were 30 families in Sudbury, in the whole vicinity of Sudbury, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. I sat and I drank the chicken soup with a straw, and my face was like out to here, and I never forgot it. I absolutely never forgot not only the pain of the stitches and everything, but what they did to me for killing Christ. It was not easy to grow up in that society. I had teachers who used to say to me, "You Jews, you have so many holidays. When do you ever go to school? You're never going to get to university." Those are the days when some of you, not all of you, because I'm old, we used to have the departmental exams in grade 13. And if you didn't get past those departmentals, you were stuck for another year. And I had to get out of Sudbury and get to Toronto. But I did grow up. The good part of it was the schooling was very difficult when you're the only Jew in the school. But the good part was being with my father in the bush, hunting. Oh, and you asked me the question, so I will tell you. The words my father told me when he drove me to university, He told me, he has taught me everything that I need to know for the rest of my life. 6 things. You can fish, you can shoot, you know how to hunt, you can fish, you can hunt, you can swear, you can swear, you can hold your liquor. Wait a minute, did I miss one? You can swear, you can hold your liquor, you can fish, you can shoot. You're a good Jew. Those are the 6 things. And that's what he told me when I came to university, like I'm going to fish in Lake Ontario, like I'm going to shoot a gun at the University of Toronto, right? But the thing was, well, drinking was another thing because this was Sudbury. We all drank when we were 6 years old. But to be a good Jew and to be a proud Jew. And those were the things that the final words when I came to university.
What a message to enter your adulthood with.
Well, it was my university years.
Your first, I guess, entry into an independent life. You talk about how your teachers didn't think that you were going to become anything, and how are you going to pursue an education with all the Jewish holidays, but you have actually an extensive educational background that some people don't know about in the field of music, which is so interesting. What led you toward a career in musicology and music education?
No showing off. When I was 16, I got my ARCT, which is the youngest you can get it. That's Associate of the Royal Conservatory, and passed all the piano and harmony and counterpoint and all these exams, and stood first in the province with the ARCT. And my high school teacher talked me into it, actually. I wasn't going to go into music, but I was accepted on scholarship at the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Music Education. I graduated there. I got my secondary school teaching certificate from OISE. I did 2 master's degrees, one in music education, one in musicology. I couldn't do a PhD because there was nobody here to teach it. So they didn't have anybody that could teach a PhD program. So I did 2 master's degrees instead while I was married and having babies. And I ended up teaching as a visiting professor at Hebrew University, at the University of Toronto, and for 1 year at Yeshiva University in the Department of Musicology. And the interesting thing is, after everything that happened in the Catholic school, at Yeshiva University, I taught components of Jewish music. But at the University of Toronto, I taught the Mass of the Catholic Church in the 14th century, which nothing blends together, but there it was. I had both sides, and the contrapuntal harmonic technique of the 18th century.
Wow.
And at Hebrew University, I taught Jewish branches of Jewish music.
Wow. Who were your Jewish role models when you were growing up? And how do you think they influenced you as an adult?
I would tell you my little Bubby from Brooklyn. My mother was born in Brooklyn. My mother graduated law school in Brooklyn and in NYU, and married a fur trader. Like, that's 2 opposite sides of the world, absolutely opposite sides of the world. And then she ends up in the bush with my father. I would tell you that when my grandmother came from New York, which was twice a year, we didn't have an airport in Sudbury. We were really primitive in those days. She used to come 2 days and 2 nights on the train with a challah for the black porters were on the trains. And she used to bring each of them a challah and gefilte fish, and she couldn't speak any English. She only could speak Yiddish, and they would put her on the train from Montreal to Sudbury, and she'd give them a challah. But she was tremendous. She was the one who took me for the first time to the library in Sudbury, which was a 3-story walk up over a Loblaws store, and picked books for me to read that had Donald Duck on the front. She couldn't read the English, but she looked at the covers and she liked them. I think she was one of my most important influences. But the other, I would tell you, was my father, who lived a life that was not the typical Jewish father's life. I mean, to live in the bush with the native Indians, to be hunting and fishing and trapping fur. And yet our home was kasher. Our meat came in once a week on the 2 o'clock in the morning train from Toronto. He carried a kosher salami and a bottle of booze, and that's how we traveled. I think he had a great deal of influence on me in terms of my life with him on the lakes, hunting, fishing. And the other one, there was a third person, was our next door neighbor in Sudbury, who was a Holocaust survivor. And she became almost my surrogate mother. She had tremendous influence on me. And I'll tell you just briefly, before my bat mitzvah, and I was bat mitzvah in Sudbury, my father changed the whole system in the shuls in the north, and we became conservative, and I was bat mitzvah. Just before my bat mitzvah, she was making my dress for me. Her name was Sophie. And she started screaming and crying when she was fixing the dress and pinning it. And she said to me that this was the day that her 2 little children were taken to Auschwitz. And she said, Judy, you remember one thing. And her daughter would have been 6 weeks older than me. And she said, you have to do something for the Jewish people. It's your obligation to do it. And she screamed and she cried like I've never heard anyone scream like this. And to this day, I still remember it. And I'm thinking, like, Sophie, what am I going to do? I'm a little kid. But that always stuck in the back of my mind. The day I finished the rescue was the day of the Trade Center. I took my last people out a quarter after 8 in the morning. 8:45, the bombs went off in the Trade Center. When this family got off that plane, the first thing that came into my mind is, Sophie, I did it for you. I paid you back. I did it.
Wow.
Those are I guess, the 3 biggest influences as a child.
Wow, thank you for that story. So rescuing a group of Jews in a hostile country far away seems like an impossible task that not very many people would consider taking on. But did it feel that way at the time? And what led you to believe that you could succeed in your mission?
I never planned to succeed. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm going to tell you bluntly, I had no idea what I was doing. Number one, I had to find Syria on the map. That's an exaggeration. I knew where Syria was. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't intend to take people out. There was an article in the Jerusalem Post about 12 young men, teenagers who tried to escape from Syria and walked on a minefield, and the Syrian border guards watched them die in agony. I thought this was the most horrible thing I'd ever read in my life. I was married, young, with little children, and that was the last thing. I was teaching university. I mean, well, anyway, an article appeared in the Globe and Mail at the time, and one of the rabbis in Toronto said we have to do something for this terrible situation that's happening in Syria. My late husband and I sent in a letter and said, we want to be on your committee, because we were involved, like everybody else at the time, in Russian Jewry. And I was the chairman of the Jewish Defense League in another life, in the JDL. I can't tell it to my husband now because he can't even. Oh my God, it's BC, before Carr. So any case, we decided to do something. But what are we going to do? We had no idea what to do. So we decided to do what was done with the Russian Jews. We decided to make a phone call to Syria, but we didn't have anybody's name. We didn't have any. We went with the Sephardi rabbi and a man who spoke 7 languages, and we decided, with nothing to do, the baby's on my shoulder, we're going to go call Syria. Because what do you do in January in the cold afternoon? You go to the Sephardi shul downtown and you decide, let's call Syria. But who are we calling? We don't know if there's a rabbi. We don't know if there's a school. We don't know anything. We don't know if there's a cemetery. We know nothing. And we got, and let me tell you, I'll tell you the story just briefly because it's a little bit long, but you might be interested. We got the operator who answered, the calls had to go through Montreal. She was from Morocco. She was Jewish. Everything's bashert that I tell you. And she, you know what bashert means? Everybody, of course, you know what the word means. In spite of yourself, things happen. We got the Montreal operating. She said, are there Jews in Syria? We said, yeah, we think so. Do you know where they are? No, but let's call anyway. Anyway, to make this short, we get through to Damascus, through Italy, and the Italian operator said, our translator said, we want a rabbi, and the Italian operator says, what's a rabbi? And our translator said, Jewish priest. Oh, okay. And we get through to Damascus, and somebody gets on the phone and says the Jewish community is incognito. In plain English, they're gone. Nobody knows where they are. We decide for the next 2.5 weeks before we finally were ready to give up, to keep calling through to Damascus. When my husband, who is a doctor, is home and I'm not working, and I can take the baby, and we can get the translator, and we can get the Sephardi rabbi, and we can get the Montreal rabbi operator. We keep calling, and then we're ready to give up when what I didn't tell you is that the Syrians closed all the telephone lines to Canada because of this phone call. Now that's almost unreal. A country closes its telephone lines to another country? Unheard of. Anyway, we're just about to give up when we get the operator in Damascus puts us through to a woman. Again, Bashar, she's not home. A Jewish woman, not home. It was a miracle she's not home because she worked. We have this in our history. She worked for the secret police of Syria, but her husband was home. And I think we almost gave him a heart attack. He gave us the name of the rabbi, the name of the school, and the telephone number, 115-224. And the lines went dead, and that was the last call that was ever made to Syria. Now we have a name and we have an address. So we decide maybe they need religious books. So I go to the Negev bookstore in Bathurst Street, and I say, what do you got in some, first of all, we send a telegram. None of you know what a telegram is. We send a telegram with a $5 answer and say to the rabbi, do you need any religious books? And we pay a $5 answer. Of course, we know we're not going to get an answer, but 10 days later, he answers, we need the following books. That was the first opening that Syrian Jews had to the outside world since 1948. That's how it started.
Wow. Were you scared?
Not when I was doing that.
But when you started sneaking people out of the country.
Oh, long before I was doing people. I wasn't intending to do people. It was only religious books.
Right.
But I had a bomb in my car while I was doing the religious books.
What do you mean by that?
What I meant is I had a bomb in the car. Someone tried to kill me and my children.
How do you go on carrying on in this mission with that kind of fear, with that kind of threat? How do you overcome that?
My husband died of a heart attack the next day at age 39. He was a doctor. The shock was incredible. They tried to kill me and the children. And the telegrams were still coming. Judy, we need this, we need this, we need this. Somehow, I just kept going.
Wow. So we all watched the documentary, and we saw some individual stories of the families that you saved. And each family, the story was different. The story was unique. They each presented themselves with different challenges. And the beauty of the documentary is that you really get to see the people that they were, the people that you saved. It wasn't just, 3,000 people, but you put a face to the name. And so I'm curious to know, to what extent are you still in touch with these families that you saved today? And how does it make you feel to see where life has taken them?
I'm not in touch with the families. I'm only in touch with the people I took out of prison, because they suffered so terribly. I took every single person out of Syrian prisons. I didn't leave one. By the time I finished, I had them all out. I have a policy because I didn't meet the people I took out, with exceptions. The ones that I took out on escape routes, I would meet some of them because I wanted to hear what happened with the smugglers. If the smuggler, it's a stupid word to use, but if you have an honorable smuggler, if there's such a thing as an honorable smuggler, but some of them didn't turn, as long as they didn't turn the Jews into the secret police on the way, they were paid enough. I sometimes met a few of the people I ransomed because I wanted to hear what happened with the secret police, and if I could do the same thing again with somebody else or with another family or part of a family. And but most of the people have no idea what I look like, or they've never seen me. And I deliberately do it that way. I don't want them to owe me anything, because at early days when I would talk to them, they would buy me presents, and I don't need presents. I don't want a present. Get a life. I'm not in it. But I know everything about them. Every single family, every single person. I lived their lives while they were in Syria. I was living them, and which is impossible role in itself. But I just, there's a few, I've been to a few of the weddings, a couple of bar mitzvahs, but I really, a few of them are like family, but I don't want me to be part of their lives, that they feel an obligation. They're free now. They don't owe me anything.
Wow. In the documentary, it says that there's a number of Judys that were born into the world that were named for you. How does that make you feel?
Oh, there's loads of other Judys. I'm going to show you a picture. Maybe you'll see, if you can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's Judy's. There's Judy's. Judy's not a Syrian name.
No, it's not.
You know, the good thing is, here I am, an Ashkenazi from the north. They'll have I won't know if anybody's going to name after me when I'm dead. But now I know there's all these Judys all over the place, including the chief rabbi's daughter. She's a Judy. There's Judys in Brooklyn, Judys in Sao Paulo. There's a couple of Judys in Mexico. And in Israel, there's, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 Judys. But there was an interesting story with the Judys. Can you see the picture? Pardon my finger.
Yeah.
2 kids did this. They went to a wedding in Bat Yam this past summer. And one is from Brooklyn. One is from Bat Yam. They were at the same wedding. They meet each other. They're both Syrians, a Syrian from Brooklyn, a Syrian from Bat Yam. And one says to the other, hi, I'm Judy, certainly Judy Swed. Another one is Judy Laham, and they meet each other. How come you're named Judy? How come you're named Judy? So you know what they did? This is the Israeli one. This is the Brooklyn one. And they put double Judy and put a heart and wrote it in little candies. And I think that's my all-time favorite picture of all times. That two of them from 2 different countries meet, and they both have the same name and they can't figure it out.
That's what I would call Bashar.
Now it's a beautiful story. That's why
it really is. Sure. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what some of your thoughts are about the biggest challenges facing the Jewish community, the Jewish people today, and what do you see as the potential solutions to these challenges?
What am I, Mashiach? I can't answer the question. Biggest challenge to me is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is one of the worst challenges. Intermarriage is another. And those 2 to me are absolutely frightening. I don't know how you can challenge anti-Semitism except fighting back. The other one is hatred towards Israel. I read the Arabic press every day. And I don't speak Arabic, but the Mossad sends me the Arabic press every day.
Of course they do.
And yeah, well, I need to know because I'm not getting people out, but I do a lot of things inside that area of the world that are not for mention. But the hatred towards Israel and to Jews is nothing you can even begin to imagine in your life. The Palestinian hatred of what they say, Palestinian Arab hatred of what they say in their own press, in their own stations, which you never see translated here. You will never see that. The Iranian hatred is beyond comprehension. The Syrian, the Iraqi, and now the Tunisian and Algerian stuff that's coming out is beyond anything I can't even believe it. It makes Hitler look almost nice. They want to destroy what there is of all of us now, and Jews don't seem to begin to understand the hatred out there. It is unreal. If I didn't read it myself, and really it's the worst thing to read before you go to bed at night. It is indescribable. Words that you can't even imagine in your wildest dreams, the type of hatred towards Israel and to Jews generally. They don't differentiate. Everything is the same. Those are, to me, the biggest problems right now. And if Jews don't start to open up their mouths and fight back, I don't know what's going to happen with governments and everything else, including how Canada votes in the UN.
Yeah, you're so right. You are talking to some of the future leaders of the Jewish people, I believe. What special traits do you think that women in particular bring to positions of leadership in the Jewish community?
I won't use Sabri language. I'm really going to be careful the rabbis on. I think sensitivity is one, but it's now more than sensitivity. Women are in unique positions. When I started teaching university, I got less money than the other professors who had less degrees than I did. But now women are really pretty well equal, I think. I just haven't been out there teaching, so I don't know anymore. But look, as an example, I dealt in an Arab country where women, in an Arab country, women don't even count. They're not even people. They're baby making machines, period. And your shidduch is made when you're 3 years old. I mean, you haven't got a choice. Women have no rights. Women have absolutely no rights. You can't drive. You can't do anything. You wear the burqa. You haven't got rights. But when I was dealing inside those countries, inside Lebanon, inside Turkey, inside Syria, I wasn't in Syria, I was outside dealing in. Do you know that I didn't have one single problem as a woman doing this? Never mind of what I was doing, which was really, really a very stressful and horrible thing to buy a human being. This is the worst thing. Can you imagine somebody being for sale, being bought? One of your children I could buy one of your children. This was horrible to deal with psychologically. But I didn't have a problem as a woman. The reason being, I came on as strong as any man inside Turkey was. Inside the Turkish hierarchy, inside the Lebanese hierarchy, dealing indirectly with secret police and government officials. I don't like the word no. And even when I dealt with the Canadian government, asking them if I could bring in a few Jewish kids into Canada, and I wouldn't walk out of the office of the ministers until I got a yes. Until they were about to tell me, not that they're going to consider it, but you know what? We will do our best. And if it was your best, I didn't let up. I went after them like a plague. But you know what? Nowadays, I have to tell you, women have to stand up for their own rights as women, not as somebody's appendage. And I mean this in all sincerity. Women it's a new life out there, and women can do it. That's why there's so many really good women in leadership in the Jewish community now. There's some great women that are leading the communities, presidents of major organizations. I'm going to give you an example. I was the president of Beth Tzedek. Now, that's not easy. There was never a woman president of Beth Tzedek. There were a lot of men who had a little bit of a problem with that. But I got in by acclamation, so what can I tell you? And it's not showing off, but women can break through molds now, which you couldn't do at one time. It was very hard for women. I think the world has changed considerably.
Thank you. I hope so too, and I think you're right. You relied in some ways on the generosity of the Toronto Jewish community when you were rescuing the Jews of Syria. In what ways do you think that the Jewish community in Toronto is unique? Have you encountered a community quite like ours anywhere else in the world?
I didn't just rely on Toronto Jewish community. I had money coming from right across Canada secretly and quietly, and from the US. I mean, it was all by word of mouth. It wasn't just Toronto. The fund was in Toronto in the Beth Tzedek. So the money would go in, that all the donations, and there was millions of dollars of donations that were coming in. Otherwise, I couldn't buy people or run escapes. I think Toronto is totally unique. Of all the Jewish communities where I'd spoken over the years, I'm talking in South America, US, Mexico, wherever. Number one, our support for Israel in Toronto is par excellence. Everybody, it seems, not everybody, you have, negative organizations, of course. But generally, the love of Israel in this city is tremendous. And Toronto has the greatest charitable organizations. You don't let anybody who's poor go without food. If it's UJA or any other Orthodox movement, conservative movement, you hear somebody needs food, you're giving, you're doing. It's a charitable city. I find it amazing, but the third thing that makes it unique is our day schools. Our day schools, you're all in day school. Look at the day schools. There's probably more day schools in this city than any other place per capita. And every kid can get to day school, even if they can't afford it, you'll be subsidized, but you can still get your kid into day school. And I know because when I was widowed and I didn't have anything, the Jewish community came to me and said, you've got 3 kids in day school. Do you want to keep going? We'll keep them in day school till you can make enough money to afford to pay us back. And you know, I never forgot that. And I paid back the community, but my kids stayed in day school. And
Wow.
this is really, really unbelievable. Unbelievable. Where else would you see this happen except here? Maybe there are other places, but I think this city is absolutely phenomenal that way.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. You have received so many accolades and so many awards for your leadership and your humanitarian efforts. Which are you proudest of and why?
Yeah. Well, I think the proudest thing is the Judys. You mentioned that. If somebody can name their child in honor of you, it's not after me, in honor of me, I think that's one of the greatest honors. The other, of all the other honors, I think the 2 that stand out in my mind beside Judy is when I got the Order of Canada and they announced in the Governor General's when you get the award, the Order of Canada, people get it for being a Nobel Prize winner, for doing something very unique in Canadian business. And they announced that I got it for saving Jews. And there was this awe in the room, like, saved Jews? These are all the glamour sitting there. She saved Jews? And I guess the other one was when I got one of the first 6 presidential awards of the state of Israel with Henry Kissinger and Bill Clinton and all Rabbi Steinsaltz and who else was there? Zubin Mehta. And they were saying, who's she? You know, like, who's she? Kissinger, they know. Rabbi Steinsaltz, they knew. Clinton, they know, but who's she? And I guess that was one of the great moments. And my Israeli children and grandchildren were all there to see it. And that their Savta did something right, you know.
Wow. Wow. So I have one final question before I hand off the rest of the questions to the group. And that is, I know you can't tell us everything that you're doing, as you alluded to before, and some secrets can never come out, but what's next for you? Is there anything down the pipeline that we could look forward to?
I think I've done everything that anybody could do right now. I would love to get back to Israel and see my babies and get a lot of hugs and do stuff like that, but that is not possible anymore with COVID and everything else. I still have my finger in things in the Middle East, but just peripherally, not the way I was doing before. Then it was day and night, and traveling and false identities and fake passports and living different lives. I don't have it anymore. And to tell you the truth, I'm tired. I'm tired. You know, I don't know if any of you can understand how much it took out of me to do what I was doing, to deal with, for people that you've never seen and probably will never know, but their life is in your hands. And if you make one little mistake, they're dead or they're hanging, one or the other. And, you know, I'm sure all of you watched the movie of Ellie Cohn on Netflix. If you haven't, you should watch it because they may be finding his body soon. Look, he was caught. Other people have been caught. I was lucky I wasn't caught. They tried to get me a few times, but they didn't, and I'm able to talk to you.
You know, you say that you're tired. I'm tired just thinking about what it was that you did over the course of your life. Before I hand things over to Miriam Besson to facilitate the next Q&A session, this is a mother-daughter night, and I have to share a sweet story with you. My eldest daughter, Sorrel Judith, who's named after my grandmother. So yes. I have a Judy in my family.
I knew your grandmother.
She was a very special lady. And I was explaining to my daughter why I couldn't tuck her into bed tonight and why her dad had to do it. And she asked why. So I said, I'm doing an interview with someone. I started to explain that there was once a group of Jews who lived in Syria, and they weren't very nice to them there, but they wouldn't let them escape. And they were stuck there. And it was so amazing that there was this woman from Toronto who saved the Jewish people of Syria and helped to bring them out to lots of places, but mostly Israel. And she looked at me with her big 6-year-old eyes and didn't say anything. And I said to myself, this was a parenting fail. I tried to explain something that is, she's way out of her depth here. I got to dial back. So I said, you know what, Sorrel, forget it. We'll talk about it another time when you get older. She said, no, I understand. It's like when the Jews were in Egypt and Moshe took them out.
Right.
And I said, that's exactly what it is. So thank you for being one of our generation's Moshe figures. You are an inspiration to us all, and we are so blessed and so grateful that you could be here with us tonight. And I hope the next time you make a visit to Ulpanat, it's in person. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Miriam Besson.
The compliments are too much.
Thank you very much, Hadassa, and thank you, Mrs. Feld Carr. We're going to turn the floor open. I know some of the girls.
Everybody else does. Stop with the Feld Carr, Judy.
So we're going to turn the floor open. I know some girls have been chomping at the bit. Everybody watched the movie. Everybody had a chance to discuss it in their RGC classes. So if any girls or mothers or grandmothers, I see a bunch on, have any questions, the floor is yours. I'm going to try to, or I guess you could drop it in the chat as well. So I'm going to try to go between the pages and see if anybody has any questions.
Wow, I guess everybody knows everything.
Ariel, I see Ariel has a question.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your story. I just had a question. Why did you decide to save the Syrian Jews rather than Jews from a different Arab country?
Well, I didn't decide, actually. It just happened. And as I mentioned, it was because of the 12 young kids who stepped on that minefield, and it didn't seem to me that anybody was doing anything about that community wherever they were. And I couldn't find anything out about anything. Remember, there was no internet or stuff like that. So it just fell on top of my lap, I think, that the kids were mutilated by the bombs, and I felt I should do something about it. And it just happened. It just happened. And if you would have told me at that time that I would end up taking people out of the country, I tell you, you were mad. You're crazy. What do I know from this? I'm just a mummy. I'm doing my mummy stuff. I'm feeding babies. I'm up at night. I'm having kids. I'm teaching. I'm going to the hairdresser when there used to be a hairdresser open. I'm doing the usual things. I'm shopping. I'm going to the butcher. I'm cooking. If you can figure it out, you're better than me, because I don't know how it happened. It just happened. And it kept getting bigger and bigger. And then I set up an underground inside Syria, which was unbelievable. And these people started to trust somebody that they didn't even know, and they didn't even know my last name. Most of them still don't know my last name. That's why the film was called Mrs. Judy, and the other ones that are on, Miss Judy, Mrs. Judy, they don't know my last name.
I see someone's raising their hand, Honey.
Hi.
Tikian Khani.
So my question was, is it necessarily right to say that like you want women to take a louder, like rational like approach when like Israel is always like taking on like the idea of being like of like keeping their integrity and like putting out like flyers before bombings and whatever and stuff like that, so people don't get hurt. And like when the JDL did something like this, like they were considered like a terrorist group almost, and like they were criticized a lot. So like, is it really better to be so much louder? And like,
if there's so much hate and what you're reading every single day in these Arab newspapers, and where you see all over the world how anti-Semitism has, been louder than ever, how is it like, how could it be that getting louder and like, how could it be that reacting is the smarter approach?
like you're fueling them, I feel like.
You're sort of, exactly.
You're talking, I'll tell you, what I think is helping to fuel a lot of this stuff too, and it's wrong to say, and it's a generalized statement, but I'm seeing Jews who are fueling it. And that's what's scaring me. An organization like Not in My Name, or forgot the name of it, the ones that are trying to the ultra left, who are trying to say that Israel's bad, whatever they do, where you have newspapers fueling it, that the Israelis didn't give vaccines to the Palestinian Arabs, therefore the Jews are killers, they don't care about life. And this was fueled by some Jews. Beinhard at the New York Times, people like that. This is a very, very frightening thing. And I don't have a solution to it. But there is a tremendous amount of hatred out there. And even from people who are in the Parliament of Canada, who belong to the Muslim Brotherhood. There's 2 in Brampton who belong to the Muslim Brotherhood. This is very, very frightening for us. Very frightening, and yet they're members of Parliament in the Liberal Party. And you have other members of Parliament, the one I've forgotten her name, in the NDP, who made some terrible statements. Ashton, the other day. It's very, very worrisome. I tell you, I worry about, I worry about my children and grandchildren. And I worry about all of you because you're the leaders. You're going to be the leaders and you've got to do something. I'm old now.
Yes. Another question somebody wrote in the chat, I think this is from Tully Wurzberger. How old were your children when you were doing this and what did they think about what you were doing?
Okay, when I started, my daughter was 3. My next son was 8. My oldest son, who lives in Israel, was 11. And then after my husband died, suddenly, as I mentioned to you, and then I remarried my husband, Donald Carr, who was a lawyer in Toronto, and he had 3 children. And his wife had died, and our kids made our little shidduch. And so now I had 6. So I raised 6 kids. And they were all different stages. When I had 2 10-year-olds, I had a 14-year-old, I had a 17-year-old, I had all these ages. And it's interesting, one of my oldest sons, I shouldn't say new because I raised them, when he got married, a couple of his friends from chat told, they all were chat kids, he said to me, we used to call your house the embassy. Why the embassy? Because when all the chat kids and USDS kids, I mean, it was madness in our house, 6 kids and all these friends, right? They would come to the house and they knew if you walked into the kitchen, you go to the cupboard and there's all the snacks and the food and everybody was eating all over the place. But they knew when one door in that house closed, you asked no questions and you said nothing to your parents or to anybody else what Alan Feld's mother was doing, what Elizabeth Feld's mother was doing, what Gary Feld, what Adam Carr's mother was doing. Nobody, there was no discussion. And not one of those 6 kids ever spoke about anything that they heard in that house or anything else. They all knew when I was going away because we had a big freezer in the basement. And you'd hear this whisper through the house, she's leaving, she's leaving, she's cooking briskets, she's leaving, the freezer's getting filled, where's she going now? You never asked, but I would always call home and wherever I was, in whatever country I was, and I would call at dinner time, leave her alone. She doesn't like asparagus. Don't hit her. Stop fighting with him. And it was, then I would be home and like nothing happened. Hi, I'm back. No discussion, unpacked and back to normal life for another few weeks. And then she's cooking again. But that's how they grew up. That's how they grew up. And it was a natural part of their life. They knew what I was doing. They just didn't know where I was when I was doing it. That's all. But
Okay,
when I was doing things at home, it was very natural.
Okay, there are a lot of questions coming in. I think I'm going to do 2 more. So
You can
Mrs.
do, I'm not going anywhere. If you guys can stay up, I'm fine with it.
Thank you.
I don't have any place to go tonight.
So Mrs. Sabetti was wondering if you think there's a chance of getting Jews out of Iran. I think Mrs. Sabetti is from Iran originally.
That's, while I was finishing the Syrian rescue, not finishing, I was getting towards the end, I had a few meetings with the Mossad and about, because I dealt with, we work together. I'm not saying it out of school. I mean, that happens to be a fact. I called my husband. It was at the time when Mr. Rabin was murdered. I was in Israel, and I called my husband to tell him, you know, I always wanted a job. I mean, I wanted a job. I wasn't teaching. The Mossad just offered me a really good job. What is it? This is a job. For this stuff, I'm not paid. For this one, they were offering me a job. What is it? They want me to go to Afghanistan or Pakistan and run the escape route out of Iran. There's a pause on the phone. I'm sorry, my husband's in the bedroom because he could tell the story better than me. And he'd say, if you even think of it, we're in a divorce court. I am living through not knowing where my wife is half the time. Iran. Then they asked me again once in the airport in Israel, and then once with my husband. And they said, well, you've got the dresses, you got I have the shmatas, I have the whole thing, the burqas, everything. And they said, you've got the clothes. I mean, what do you do with the clothes? Wear it on Purim? I said to him, no, but I'll tell you, I did get 3 people out of Iran. One, the parents of an Air Canada airline pilot. It wasn't hard at all. I did it from here. And then there was another older couple that I took out. They were members of Beth Tzedek. Again, they left through Switzerland. But now Iran is very difficult. And the only way they can get out is, I think, by escaping. What I never understood is why the Iranian Jews stayed when so many were leaving. Look, if you go to Los Angeles, Rodeo Drive, this is all Iranian stores. And in New York, I don't understand why they stayed. If it was for the finances or what, I don't know why they stayed in Iran. You could see the writing on the wall years ago. Go, get out. A lot of them had their money out. The rich ones had their money already transferred into Los Angeles and into New York. I don't understand it, but then again, I wouldn't want to be a Jew in Iran right now. That's very frightening. That is very frightening right now.
Mrs. Judy, I heard a rumor that Netflix might be picking up a show or a film. Can you confirm that rumor?
Well, it's not a rumor. And a company that's an international company based in Tel Aviv, but they have offices in Switzerland and in Mexico and I don't know where. I signed a contract with them. Now whether they can do this or not, they've done the interviews with me. They've done interviews with a few Syrians. It's not going to be a documentary like the one that's on. That they're envisioning is like a Netflix thing, but fictionalized. And what their problem is, they tell me, is finding a writer who can do a script, who can understand. Like, we're just talking peripherally. You can't imagine what there is in this story. I mean, year after year, and each person is a history in itself. They're thinking about doing this, but right now they haven't found a writer. And of course, with COVID, they can't travel. They had a writer they were looking at in Los Angeles, but it's all by Zoom. You have to talk personally to the people. I guess they have to talk. I have nothing to do with it. It's up to them. I have a contract with them for another, I guess, year and a half, and they have to come up with it, but I only have one stipulation, and I know I'm not joking with all of you because we're all women except for the rabbi. One thing that I've said to them, you can do whatever you want, but do not put me in bed with an Arab. Now, that may sound funny, but remember, I was doing this at 33 years old, and I had long hair and unlined, and I was in these countries and with the burqas and everything. Don't put me in bed with an Arab. You can say whatever else you want to fictionalize, but don't do that. And we'll see what happens if anything. They have a year and a half. If not, you know what? It's okay. But I have hundreds and hundreds of files which will go to the National Archives in Ottawa eventually. And I have the biggest modern history of Syrian Jewry in my little notes, my little pieces of paper in everybody's file. And everything that I ever did is in the files, in these little handwritten pieces of paper, which only I can decipher because I wrote them for me.
Thank you very much. I know other people have questions, and
Okay.
it sounds like Mrs. Judy is okay to stay on a little bit after. So I just want to move. We have a special guest speaker also here tonight, or a presenter from JIAS, from the Jewish Immigrant AIDS Service Society. Oh, thank you, Mom. And her name is Jody Block. And Jody is going to just explain to us a little bit about the work that JIAS does. I don't think everybody is familiar with the work that JIAS does. And as a highlight, or as a preview, we're hopefully going to be pairing up with JIAS and doing some volunteer work after Pesach. We're going to hopefully, I don't know if Jody, if this is okay to say, but they have 2 schools where they teach English. And one of the schools is on Hove, which is actually quite close to Ulpanat. And the school needs some painting for when the students return next year, God willing, in person. So hopefully we're going to be able to go over there and do some painting. And so Jody is going to speak a little bit about the work that JIAS does.
Hi, everyone. I'm truly horrified to be interrupting Mrs. Judy. This has been incredible. And I thank you for bearing with me for just a few minutes. I will make it brief. And it's a privilege to be part of the program. I'm going to start by just showing you a very brief 1-minute video. So bear with me while I just share my screen and the audio. And then please, of course, it's not showing. Hold on. And then you'll tell me if you cannot hear. Hold on. Okay, sorry, just one moment. Not showing up.
I used to work with JIAS. It's how we work together here in Canada to get people in the country.
I'm so sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay. Hold on. Can't hear motion. Can you hear? Okay.
I left my country.
I left my country.
I left my country
to escape danger,
to build a better life,
to find economic opportunities,
in a place where I will be accepted.
Living was not easy.
It wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy.
I left behind loved ones,
friends,
and my work.
I arrived in Canada, relieved.
And excited.
But at the same time, overwhelmed.
Lonely.
Self-conscious. All of a sudden, I wasn't sure how to do simple, everyday activities.
Or how to provide for my family.
Someone told me about JIAS.
They helped me develop a plan.
And told me I am not alone.
I am not alone.
I am not alone.
They've connected me to English language classes.
To a new community.
To mentors who helped me find work.
And the place to live.
JIAS reminded me that
I'm not just an immigrant.
I am someone with dreams
With the ability
and desire to contribute.
Someone whose identity,
Traditions.
And culture is valued.
Someone worthy of being treated
with dignity,
kindness,
and respect.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is every immigrant's story.
This is the JIAS story.
So I just wanted to start with that video. I find it very powerful. And one of the reasons why I find it powerful, perhaps, is because the people in this video are actually real JIAS clients who we invited to the Lipa Green building down the street from Ulpanat in November of 2019. And they include Jewish newcomers from Israel, Russia, India, Hungary, Romania, Turkey, as well as other clients of JIAS, including refugee from Eritrea and Syria, actually. And by the way, I would love to hear about your work with JIAS, Mrs. Judy. So the boy in the last frame who closed off the video is actually from Istanbul, Turkey. He's a Jewish kid whose family left Turkey because of the Islamification of Turkish politics and anti-Jewish sentiment, anti-Israel sentiment there. And we've actually seen a stream of Turkish families coming to Toronto in the last few years. And I'm happy to say that he's starting school at Chat next fall. So each of the people in this story, each of the people in this video, and each of the clients of JIAS have a unique backstory and a unique journey to Canada, but at the same time, they have a great deal in common. So they all, whether they planned their immigration or they fled a war or persecution, they all left behind family and friends and community and their home and really everything that was familiar. And whether you choose to immigrate or are forced, immigration is always hard, right? It entails leaving all of the things that I just mentioned and everything that's familiar to you. So why do people immigrate? Very simply, for a better life, for safety, for security, for democracy, for better opportunities for their children. So what does this have to do with JIAS? JIAS, which is Jewish Immigrant Aid Services Toronto, but it's often confused with society because JIAS is Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society in the States. We're the only Jewish organization in Canada that has the sole job of welcoming and helping newcomers to Canada as they transition to a new country. And we're also the only Jewish sponsorship agreement holder. A sponsorship agreement holder, or SA, is an organization that has an agreement with the Canadian government and has the ability to sponsor refugees. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to keep it really brief, but I'm just going to tell you where Jewish immigrants are coming from and how we can help them. Our community has been growing since JIAS was established 100 years ago, largely due to immigration, and Jews are still moving to the GTA. In fact, York Region in recent years has been declared one of the fastest growing Jewish communities in North America, and that's because of immigration. So Jews are coming. We always have a steady stream of newcomers from Israel. Many of them are second-time immigrants who came from the former Soviet Union. We see, wherever there are things happening in the world, we see sort of a reflection of that in immigration, right? So we see a steady stream of Jewish immigrants from Mexico, for example, where there's a big Jewish community, but there's a lot of violence. From other countries in South America that have had violence and instability in recent years. From Turkey, as I mentioned, and from Europe, of course, France, Romania, Hungary, Russia, and other former Soviet countries. So how do we help them? First of all, as I mentioned, we're a sponsorship agreement holder. So right now, I would say, Mrs. Judy rightly flagged anti-Semitism around the world, but most Jewish immigrants are not coming as refugees. They are coming in planned immigration. However, we do have the ability as a sponsorship agreement holder that if there were a crisis, we have the ability to sponsor refugees and Jewish refugees to come to Canada. We meet with each family and we help them come up with a plan. We help them make decisions about things like where to live, where to go to school. We help them understand how to access all the services they need. We have 2 English language schools, as was mentioned, and you may be helping to beautify one of them. And we have volunteer programs that you might be able to get involved with, including a reading club for young kids, online school support or tutoring for newcomer kids struggling with English and with online learning. And we also connect newcomers with people in the community just to have a Shabbat dinner, to meet people outside of their newcomer circles, to have an entry point to community life. And these are just a few of the ways that we help them. But of course, I only have a few minutes. So I just want to, I guess, close by reminding us all the phrase that's repeated no less than 36 times in the Torah. And just to pull one of the mentions from Devarim, V'ahavtem et hager ki gerim hayitim be'eretz Mitzrayim. And we're told over and over again to love the stranger, to care for the stranger, to welcome the stranger. And why so many times? Because maybe it doesn't always come naturally. You know, Mrs. Judy is an incredible inspiration. And I think a lot of us, we're in our own lives and we're not thinking about the people we don't know, right? We're not thinking about the people who aren't in our midst. So it is our job at JIAS, and it is really all of our jobs to help welcome the stranger, whether they're within the Jewish community or not. And whether it's as volunteers with JIAS or just as young women out in the world, you know, welcoming people who are new to our community and new to Canada is, you know, a great mitzvah. So I just want to thank you for having me for a couple of minutes. I'm going to stay on and listen to more Mrs. Judy, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jody. And then Mrs. Deutsch, I know, was going to close just with a brief Torah thought. So thank you, Mrs. Deutsch. Thank you again, Jody.
Okay, I will keep it very, very brief. So we know we're coming up now on the holiday of Pesach, and in the Exodus narrative, when we have just after or in between the 7th and the 8th Makkah, Moshe goes to Paro and says, "Okay, can we get the Jewish people out so we can go serve our God?" And Paro says, "Well, who has to go?" And Moshe says, like, duh, everybody. What are you talking about? But you have to understand that in the ancient way of understanding religion, all you were doing was going to appease the gods. You had to go give some sort of sacrifice, and all you really needed was the men, because appeasing a god meant you have all the power. You're upset with me. You don't care about me. There's a distance between us. I have to give you something of value to me, something important, in order to get you off my back. So why do you need everybody to come with that? But as Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman explains, Judaism is not a religion. Judaism is a relationship. And in a relationship, the idea is not appeasement. The idea is becoming close. And we even see that in the word for korban, right? Korban comes from the word likarev, to come close. So how could we have had something where we're going out to have this almost like a family affair, to get close to Hashem and not take everybody? So Moshe said to Paro, like, everybody's got to come. We need the elderly, we need the children, and we need the women. And the women were so important. They needed to come too. And the women were such a huge part of the entire story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we know that we're told in the Talmud that it was because of the righteous women that we were saved. But if you really look throughout Jewish history, in the words of my big fat Greek wedding, the Jewish men have always been the head. It's true. But boy, oh boy, are we the neck, right? When Abraham and Sarah weren't having children, who was the one who came up with the idea that Hagar needed to marry Abraham so that there could be some kind of child? It was Sarah. And when Abraham wasn't sure, he turned to Hashem, and Hashem said, you better listen to her. She knows what she's talking about. Okay. Then we have the whole story with Leah and Rachel. The two of them came up with the switcheroo and all that sort of thing. They didn't even consult with Yaakov. He wasn't in on the idea at all. And as we see the Jewish women come through the story of in Egypt, where the men decided, okay, you know what, we're getting divorced. We're not having babies anymore. We're not doing this. And little Yocheved goes up to her father and she's like, you know what, Daddy, you're worse than Paro, because he only wants to kill the boys, but because of you, we're not going to have any girls either. And she's the one who gets him to come to his senses. And it was Shifra and Pua, the two women midwives, who made sure to do the best that they could to be able to save the babies. And then it was Batya, who I know wasn't a Jewish woman per se, but think about what she did for the Geula also, that she was willing to put her neck on the line to take Moshe out of the water and save him. And then we see later on, after the Yetziah, after the splitting of the Yam Suf, who was it that had the tambourines ready? Who were the ones that left with the knowledge and the faith that this is all going to end well, that they were ready and prepared with the musical instruments. So I know that generally speaking, when we head into the Pesach season, it is a lot of work for us. And very often it falls on the women. But we need to remember what a pivotal role we play, not just in getting the house clean and having the Seder ready and getting that table set. What a pivotal role we really play in all of Jewish history. How much we have been steering things in our own ways since the beginning of time. And Mrs. Judy is just one example of what a strong woman, a strong Jewish woman with so much faith and so much belief in the fact that it's going to be good, that God is there with us and helping us along. That is just a beautiful example of what a strong Jewish woman can do. So I want to thank everybody so much for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to address you, and I'm just wishing everybody a wonderful night and Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Deutsch. I forgot to say that our connection with JIAS started from Gila Green, one of our members of our grade 12 Chesed committee. So thank you so much, Gila, for making the shidduch with Jody. And I know, again, thank you, everybody. I know people have a lot going on. We have T-minus 2 weeks until Pesach. I know I said the P word, but I appreciate everybody joining us this evening. I know a lot of people are feeling very zoomed out. We've been on Zoom the last 2 days. God willing, we'll be back in person tomorrow. But Mrs. Judy, do you have a couple more minutes for the people who want to stay on and didn't have a chance to ask their questions?
Yeah, I'm not going to the butcher till Thursday.
Fantastic.
I mean, talk about reality. I think, by the way, I think JIAS is the greatest, and you really have to support that organization. They do miracles. And I've been involved with them many years ago, and they were really tremendous, understanding and kind and great.
We're having our 100th anniversary in 2022. Can we call you Mrs. Judy?
I was on the board of JIAS in the States and JIAS here, but really you do great work, and you really, all of you have to help out because they're very special group.
So we had a few more questions. I don't know if
I'm
there's
fine with it.
right, if they're still here, but does anybody, I'm going to scroll back through. So one of our students, I don't know if she's still on, Aliyah Moyal, asked how you live your life out in the open and speak freely about this. Does it not endanger your life?
I hope not now. There was a threat about 8 months ago when it was Eli Cohn's yard site. I told you Eli Cohn was hanged in Damascus, one of the great Israeli spies. When it was his yard site about 8 months ago, it was very strange. The front page of Al Tishrin, the Syrian newspaper in Arabic, had a headline in Arabic, 2 Israeli spies. And they had a picture of Eli Cohn as he was, and a picture of Eli Cohn hanging. And then beside it was the picture. I don't know if I'll show you this. One sec. You know, there's a book. There's a book in Canada. I'm not selling you the book. It's written by a professor at the University of Toronto called The Rescuer. There's a picture you can see in the shadow, which is me before all the lines. Right here. The cover of that book was on the page of Al Tishrin next to Eli Cohn's picture with the noose. And it said, 2 spies of Israel. He's dead, she's still alive. Now that was 8 months ago. I don't know. I think Assad has a little bit more on his plate right now with all these terrorist groups in this country, that why on earth would they have my picture next to Eli Cohn now all these years later when I finished during the Trade Center. Well, I've done stuff in this country, but not rescue. And I don't know why that that happened just about 8 months ago.
Wow,
Now
that's-
it's quiet. Nobody, I don't want to give an ahara, but I want it to stay like this.
Wow, that's frightening. And may Hashem protect you and watch over you for many, many more years to come. Kesti, Mrs. Kestenbaum has a question.
Okay.
Hi, I'm one of the teachers at Ulpanat. And I think my father was very involved with Soviet Jewry, and I think maybe he actually worked together with you way back when.
What's your father?
Shlomo Mendel, Rabbi Shlomo Mendel, together with Mr. Reichman.
I know Rabbi Mendel. Well, my husband knows him.
Yes, that's right.
Not
He actually
so
listened
much.
in for a
My
little
husband-
bit of the talk tonight, so my parents really enjoyed. But one of the courses that I teach at Ulpanat is the course is called Tough Jews, and we really focus on a lot of different social issues. So we've done civil rights, we've done the labor movement. We're actually starting the fight for Soviet Jewry now. And I think that's something that has come up often in our class, is that we're talking about these huge issues, like these things that just seem completely unsolvable. Like rescue all the Syrian Jews, right? It sounds so ginormous and so big. I wonder if you had any advice for the students who are still on, or something I can give over as, someone who basically single-handedly conquered this massive situation, some advice that we can give over to our students to feel like they can actually accomplish something that might seem unaccomplishable or unsolvable.
Well, the difference between the Soviet Jewry movement and this was you had the whole world doing Soviet Jewry. Everybody, I mean, I used to go to the demonstrations to send the stuff to, the telegrams and everything to Mrs. Sharansky and things like that. And my husband and I even went to Russia because my husband was on the board of McDonald's, and they had the opening of McDonald's, and we brought all drugs in our suitcases because nobody was stopping us. We were the McDonald's group, opening in Moscow. But this, sometimes I think impossible things confront you in your life. And I'm talking Syrian Jewry, but there's other things, terrible things that sometimes happen that you think are impossible, that there's no way you can solve it. And I just have this thing in the back of my head, and that may be coming from my father, and with the hunting and the fishing and the boats and the canoes and everything, that I just have this concept that nothing can be impossible other than death. And that I think that obstacle and after obstacle hit you all the time in your life, even if it's a little thing, but to you it's major. It can be a silly thing that is irrelevant in your life. It's not even important, but at that moment it is so important. And I just have this thing which I kept always telling my children: don't tell me you can't do it. To the best of your ability, you have to conquer it. As it may not be perfect, it may not be what somebody would deem was great, but if you do it, you do your best, and you hope it's going to turn out. And I really say to you, in all honesty, like I did at the beginning, I didn't have any idea what I was doing here. The whole thing, in a sense, is ludicrous. I can look at this and I can look at Troper's book and I can look at that film that you saw or look at the stuff that's on Google and say, hey, that wasn't me. How did I do that? How did I do that? I'm not even Syrian. I've never been inside Syria. In the days when I was younger, they used to wear the long hair and the burqa. Yeah, I looked like a Syrian. But you know, it's funny with it. Life puts these things in front of you, and I just believe you have to do the best you can and try and just conquer the problem. Just conquer the problem, whatever it is. And it can be anything, even with the cooking for Pesach, which is driving you crazy. And am I going to be ready in the time? And is the soup is going to be good? And the matzo balls turned out hard. So you know what? Throw them in the garbage and make another set. You know, you just have to keep going. Life gives you, and I know from experience, life gives you some really hard knocks. Either you're going to give into it, and it's easier just to stay in bed and say, I'm not doing it, I don't care anymore, or you're going to get up and you're going to fight back. And I'm going to tell you, look, when my husband died, my baby was 3 years old, and he shouldn't have died. It was what I was doing. And I would hear at night, Mommy, no, Daddy, Daddy, I want my daddy. Oh, I forgot my daddy's dead. Now you listen to that from a 3-year-old and you say, how am I going to continue? What am I going to say to the 3-year-old child? And so what I did is I used that one summer when we were in Israel. I volunteered after the Lebanese war to help a woman whose husband was killed the first one who was killed in Lebanon. And what I did is sit with her, be with her, and she couldn't accept me at all because what do you know? You're a Canadian. What do you know? And the doctor had said to me, don't tell her that you're widowed. Look, I was widowed at 33. And then finally on the last day that I was with her, before I went home, she said to me, you'll never understand what I'm going through. I said, yes, I will. You're the same age as I was. And I had a 3-year-old and she had a 3-year-old. But then she said to me, I'm pregnant. And my husband was killed at Beaufort in Lebanon. And, you know, I listened to that and I thought to myself, and you're talking about you? She's going to have a baby without a husband now. And what can I say to you? We overcome. We have to make ourselves overcome all the hard things in our life. And you know, I believe as women and as young women, you'd be surprised at the strength you've got. You'd never be surprised at what strength you've got there. I mean, I look at Jody, listens to Soros all day in JIAS, and there's Soros. These people have left the country. They're scared, they're worried. They have to start all over in a new language, a new whole concept. And you know what? We find the strength to do it. I don't know how we do it. But we are rather miraculous. You know that as women? I think we're rather miraculous. We can do these things. And I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, but I just believe that you just can't give up. You just have to keep going and make yourself go and conquer it. And you'll do it. You'll do it.
Love that message. Leah Zwiebel, I'm not sure if she's still on, but Leah was asking if your father, I know you mentioned him as one of your three role models. Was your father around to witness any of your wonderful accomplishments?
He was, yeah, but I never told him. He had no idea what I was doing. My mother used to say, I used to tell my mother that I had to go away for a few days because she used to say, you have to take me to the doctor. I've got an appointment. How come you're not taking me? Well, Mother, I'm very tired. I've got 6 kids at home and I'm sorry, I can't take you to the appointment. You'll have to take a taxi. I can't be there. Look, rotten daughter, horrible daughter. She said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to a spa. And I'd come back and she'd look at me and she'd say, you went to a spa? You look more tired than you came when before you left. I said, well, if you had to raise 6 kids, you'd be tired too. But I wasn't. I was in Lebanon. I mean, yeah, I was a little tired. It's a long trip, you know, and I'm setting up an escape route in the port of Juna. What do you want from me? I'm a little tired, but I couldn't tell her that. I'm in a spa in Florida, for all she knew. And, but that was the life.
Unbelievable.
Or I'm in Istanbul or someplace, you know.
I think I got to all the questions in the chat. I'm not sure. I'm trying to look now to see if anybody has any other last questions for Mrs. Judy. Trying to see if I'm missing anything. Oh, someone's typing. It looks like someone's typing. Not. Okay. Yes. All right. So I think those are all the questions that we have for tonight. Mrs. Judy, thank you so very much for taking the time. And you know, we went overtime, but this has just been a phenomenal evening with amazing messages. I mean, especially for our students, but for all of us, for all the mothers watching, for all the teachers that are on tonight, for all the grandmothers that are on tonight. Thank you so much, Hadassa, for taking the time to ask those fantastic questions. And to all of you for joining us this evening, for staying on and for listening in. And I hope this inspires you the way that it inspired me personally. And again, Mrs. Judy, may God protect you and watch over you and grant you continued health and blessings. And may you get to Israel to hug your babies, like you said, very soon.
Amen. We hope, inshallah. Anyway, thank you all. It was a delight to meet you all. And I wish you a wonderful Chag Pesach Sameach and everything good. And go for it, ladies. You can do anything you want. I believe it.